Nothing says marital bliss like finding your wife's burner phone while doing laundry at 6 in the morning. I'm Marshall Dyer, 43 years old, financial analyst for a mid-sized firm in this godforsaken New England coastal town that looks like Stephen King threw up all over a postcard. The kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do, where the harbor smells like rotten fish and broken dreams, and where the mill buildings stand empty like tombstones to better times. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I was pulling Dana's designer jeans from the washer when the phone tumbled out, clattering on the concrete floor of our basement laundry room. A cheap flip phone, the kind drug dealers use, or cheating wives. My hands shook as I opened it. 27 messages from .1 over the past month. I didn't need a detective's badge to figure out who .2 was. Colby Crane, the contractor who'd fixed our fence last spring and apparently decided to fix a few other things while he was at it. The messages made my stomach turn. Explicit photos, plans to meet at the Riverside Motel on Route 9, details about positions I hadn't seen from my wife in 2 years, and the kicker, yesterday's message. Can't wait to feel you again tonight. Tell Marshall you're working late. I'd bought that lie. Sat home watching the Red Sox lose while eating leftover pizza, thinking my wife of 15 years was grinding away at her boutique's books. Instead, she was grinding away with a married contractor whose idea of romance probably involved power tools. The basement felt like it was spinning. 15 years. 15 goddamn years of marriage, of building something together in this hopeless town, of me working 60-hour weeks to support her dream of owning a high-end clothing store that hemorrhaged money faster than a punctured artery. I heard footsteps upstairs, Dana getting ready for another day of playing the successful businesswoman. I slipped the phone into my pocket and headed up to face my lying wife. "Morning, honey," she chirped, not looking up from her coffee. She was dressed in one of those outfits that cost more than my monthly car payment. Black blazer, designer jeans, boots that could fund a small vacation. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked like a woman who had her life together. She looked like a woman who definitely wasn't screwing the local contractor. Quote, 6. I asked, pouring coffee with hands that wanted to strangle something. Quote, 7. She glanced at her Rolex, another purchase that had come out of our joint account without discussion. Quote, 8. She kissed my cheek, the same lips that had been doing God knows what to Colby Crane. I wanted to grab her, shake her, demand the truth. Instead, I smiled and watched her leave. After her BMW disappeared down Maple Street, I sat at our kitchen table and scrolled through more messages. The affair had been going on for 3 months. 3 months of lies, of quote 9, of mysterious phone calls she took on the porch, of sudden interest in new lingerie that I never got to see. But it wasn't just the cheating that made my blood boil. It was the money. Our joint account showed regular withdrawals, 50 here, 100 there, gas for their little adventures, dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, a weekend at some bed and breakfast in Vermont that she'd told me was a business conference. I was funding my own humiliation. My phone buzzed. Text from my neighbor Becca Morrison, the town's unofficial gossip coordinator. Quote 11. Even the neighbors could see it. In a town this size, secrets had a shelf life of about 24 hours. How long before everyone knew Marshall Dyer was a cuckold? I called in sick to work, first time in 3 years, and drove to Murphy's boxing gym on the south side of town. The place smelled like sweat, old leather, and honest work. Frankie Murphy, 70-year-old former heavyweight who'd trained fighters back when boxing mattered, was wrapping some kids' hands. "Marshall, what brings you here on a Wednesday morning? Thought you white-collar types were allergic to sunlight." "Need to hit something, Frankie." He looked at me closer. Woman trouble? The worst kind. Frankie finished with the kid and walked over. Let me guess. She's stepping out. I nodded. In a town this small, Frankie heard everything. His gym was neutral ground where construction workers, cops, and the occasional accountant worked out their demons. You gonna take it lying down, or you gonna hit back? I don't know yet. Well, while you're figuring it out, might as well work up a sweat. I spent 2 hours beating the heavy bag, imagining Colby Crane's face with every punch. Frankie watched, occasionally calling out corrections to my form. By the time I was done, my hands were raw and my head was clearer. Quote 20. Frankie asked. Quote 21. Quote 22. I drove home thinking about those words. Fight smart. I was a financial analyst. I knew how to research, how to plan, how to find patterns in data. Maybe it was time to apply those skills to my personal life. That evening, Dana came home at her usual time, 7:30, right after the Riverside Motel's happy hour, I assumed. How was inventory? I asked. Exhausting. I'm going to shower and go to bed early. She disappeared upstairs. I heard the shower running and used the opportunity to search her purse. Credit card receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of, a hotel key card from last weekend's business conference, and tucked in a side pocket, a second phone, her real phone, not the burner. The text messages on this one were worse. Screenshots of our bank statements sent to Colby with laughing emojis, photos of our bedroom sent with the caption, "Where the sucker sleeps," and worst of all, a group chat with her friends discussing Marshall's pathetic attempts at romance and how Colby makes me feel like a real woman. I was a joke. A walking ATM machine with the emotional intelligence of a houseplant, according to my wife and her circle of friends. But jokes have a way of becoming tragedies. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, tragedies become revenge stories. I put everything back exactly where I found it and went to bed next to my cheating wife, already planning my next move. 3 days of playing the clueless husband nearly eliminated me. Watching Dana lie to my face every morning, pretend to care about my day, kiss me goodbye before going to screw another man, it was like swallowing glass. But I needed time to plan, and I needed allies. Lydia Crane was my first stop. I found her at Millfield Elementary, picking up her twin boys from after-school care. Lydia was everything Dana wasn't: practical clothes, sensible car, genuine smile when she saw her kids. She looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from raising children while your husband plays house with someone else's wife. Quote 29. She seemed surprised to see me. Quote 30. Quote 31. Her face went pale. Quote 32. Quote 33. She looked around the parking lot, checking for familiar faces. Quote 34. Murphy's Bar was attached to Frankie's Gym, a dive that served cheap beer to working-class guys who didn't care about craft brewing or artisanal anything. Lydia was already there when I arrived, nursing a whiskey that looked like it wasn't her first. Quote 35. She asked, without preamble. Quote 36. Quote 37. She laughed bitterly. Quote 38. Quote 39. Quote 40. She took another sip. Quote 41. Smart woman, smarter than I'd given her credit for. What kind of evidence are we talking about? Lydia pulled out a manila folder. GPS tracker on his truck, hotel receipts, photos from the private investigator, and this. She slid a bank statement across the table. He's been using our home equity line of credit to pay for their little adventures. $17,000 in 3 months? I whistled low. That's felony territory. Gets better. Your wife's been padding her business expenses and claiming personal purchases as tax deductions. The investigator found receipts. If the IRS ever audits her boutique, she's looking at serious jail time. We sat in silence for a moment, processing the magnitude of what we'd discovered. Our spouses weren't just cheaters. They were thieves, embezzlers, fraudsters. So what's the plan? I asked. Mutual assured destruction. We coordinate our attacks, share evidence, make sure they can't play victim or turn this around on us. She finished her whiskey. But first, we need to document everything. More photos, more financial records, more evidence of their lies. I can handle the financial side. Bank records, credit card statements, tax documents. And I'll handle surveillance. The investigator taught me a few tricks before I ran out of money to pay him. We shook hands like business partners closing a deal, which, in a way, we were. Over the next week, Lydia and I became a two-person intelligence operation. She followed them to their romantic rendezvous, while I dug through financial records. The pattern that emerged was breathtaking in its stupidity and arrogance. They weren't just having an affair, they were flaunting it. Expensive dinners charged to business accounts, weekend getaways paid for with home equity loans. Dana had even bought Colby a Rolex with money from our joint savings, claiming it was a, quote, 52 for her boutique. But the real gold mine was their digital communication. Lydia had installed spyware on Colby's phone during one of his drunken stupors, giving us access to every text, email, and photo. The things they said about us were cruel enough, but the things they said about our friends, our families, our entire lives, it was sociopathic. Dana's messages were particularly vicious. Quote, 53. Colby's responses were worse. Your husband's a beta cuck who couldn't satisfy a blow-up doll. When this is over, I'm going to enjoy watching him cry. They had plans, big plans. Dana was going to divorce me and take half of everything, claiming emotional abuse and irreconcilable differences. Colby was going to leave Lydia and the kids, move to Florida with Dana, and start a new life with my money and her boutique. They'd already consulted lawyers, already started moving assets, already begun the process of destroying our lives while we slept next to them every night. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated their victims. Quote, 55. Lydia said during our second meeting at Murphy's, public humiliation. What did you have in mind? Dana's hosting that fashion show fundraiser next weekend, right? The one for the Children's Hospital? I nodded. The annual event was Dana's pride and joy, her chance to play society hostess in front of the town's elite. She'd been planning it for months. Quote, 59. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Quote, 60. Quote, 61. We spent the rest of the evening planning our attack, every detail, every contingency, every possible escape route they might try. By the time we left Murphy's, we had a plan that would destroy them both in one spectacular evening. But first, we had one more week of playing the fool. One more week of lies and fake smiles and pretending we didn't know our spouses were planning to destroy us. One more week of being victims. After that, it would be their turn. The Millfield Community Center had been transformed into something resembling elegance for Dana's fashion show. White tablecloths, donated flowers, a makeshift runway down the center of the room. Dana flitted around like a nervous butterfly, adjusting decorations and barking orders at volunteers. She looked beautiful. That was the hell of it. Even knowing what I knew, even hating her with every fiber of my being, I could still see why Colby wanted her. The black cocktail dress that hugged her curves, the way her blonde hair caught the light, the confident smile she wore like armor. She was stunning. She was also about to be destroyed. Marshall, honey, you look handsome, she said, straightening my tie. The same hands that had been all over Colby Crane were now playing the loving wife. I'm so glad you're here to support this cause. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, meaning every word for entirely different reasons than she imagined. The crowd was impressive, about 200 people, including the mayor, several town council members, and most of the local business owners. Dana's boutique customers, Colby's construction clients, our mutual friends and neighbors. Everyone who mattered in our small town was here to see Dana's moment of triumph. They were about to get a very different show. Colby arrived fashionably late, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. He glad-handed his way through the crowd, playing the successful contractor and devoted family man. Lydia walked beside him, smiling and nodding, the perfect wife. She caught my eye across the room and nodded slightly. Everything was ready. The fashion show itself was actually well done. Local models wearing clothes from Dana's boutique, professional lighting, decent music. Dana had real talent for this kind of event. Too bad she was about to lose everything. During intermission, while guests mingled and bid on silent auction items, I made my way to the small stage where a microphone waited for the evening's closing remarks. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room, "I'd like to take a moment to talk about something very important to all of us, the bonds of marriage and family that hold our community together." Dana looked puzzled, but pleased. She probably thought I was about to give some heartfelt speech about how proud I was of her work. "Marriage is built on trust," I continued, "on honesty, on the belief that the person you've chosen to spend your life with will honor the vows they made before God and family." A few people nodded approvingly. The mayor smiled. Dana beamed. Unfortunately, not everyone in our community shares those values. The mood in the room shifted slightly. Dana's smile faltered. Quote, 70. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's sound system. "I'd like to share with you some audio recordings that demonstrate what I mean." Dana's face went white. Colby started moving toward the stage, but Lydia blocked his path with surprising strength. The first recording played clearly through the speakers. Dana's voice, unmistakable, describing in graphic detail what she wanted to do to Colby. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. "That's enough," Dana shouted, rushing toward the stage. "Oh, we're just getting started," I said, playing the next recording. Colby talking about how pathetic I was, how easy it was to steal my wife, how much he enjoyed spending my money on their affair. By the third recording, Dana explaining to her friends how she planned to take me for everything in the divorce, the crowd was in full uproar. People were shouting, pointing, pulling out their phones to record the chaos. Colby finally broke free from Lydia and charged the stage. "You snake!" I stepped aside and let him crash into the microphone stand. As he struggled to his feet, I played the final recording, the two of them planning to frame me for domestic abuse to strengthen Dana's divorce case. That's when the crowd turned ugly. These were working-class people who understood the value of marriage, of loyalty, of honest work. They didn't appreciate being lied to by people they'd trusted. "Get out!" someone shouted. "Cheating whore!" yelled another. Dana was crying now, mascara streaming down her face, her perfect evening in ruins. Colby was bleeding from where he'd hit the microphone, his expensive suit torn and dirty. But I wasn't done. "There's more," I announced, as the crowd quieted to hear what other revelations were coming. Financial records showing how they've been stealing from their own families to fund this affair. I displayed the bank statements on the room's projection screen. $17,000 from Colby's home equity line, $23,000 from Dana's business account, fraudulent tax deductions, forged documents. Quote 79, I said. Quote 80. The mayor stepped forward. Quote 81, quote 82, I interrupted. Quote 83. Lydia took the microphone. Quote 84, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Quote 85. The crowd's anger reached a crescendo. People were shouting, demanding answers, calling for police. Several of Colby's clients were already talking about lawsuits. Dana's customers were demanding refunds. In the chaos, Dana and Colby tried to escape, but the crowd blocked their path. They were trapped in the center of the room, surrounded by 200 angry neighbors who now knew exactly what kind of people they really were. "Please," Dana begged, grabbing my arm. "Marshall, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can fix this." I looked down at her tear-streaked face, at the desperation in her eyes, and felt absolutely nothing. "The only mistake you made was thinking I was too stupid to figure it out," I said. "But don't worry. I'm sure you and Colby will have plenty of time to work things out. In separate jail cells." That's when the police arrived. The aftermath of the fashion show was everything I'd hoped for and more. Within hours, cell phone videos of Dana and Colby's public humiliation were circulating on social media. By morning, the story had been picked up by regional news outlets. By the end of the week, my cheating wife and her boyfriend were the most famous couple in New England, for all the wrong reasons. But public embarrassment was just the appetizer. The main course was legal and financial destruction. Lydia and I had spent weeks preparing our case with the help of Sarah Mitchell, the toughest divorce attorney in the state. Sarah was a shark in a business suit, the kind of lawyer who ate cheating spouses for breakfast and used their bones to pick her teeth. Quote 90. Sarah told us during our first official meeting. Quote 91. The criminal charges came first. The district attorney, a family values Republican who was up for re-election, saw political gold in prosecuting 2 adulterers who'd stolen from their families. Dana was charged with embezzlement, tax fraud, and theft. Colby faced similar charges plus forgery for the fake documents he'd created to hide the home equity withdrawals. Their arraignment was a media circus. Dana tried to hide behind sunglasses and a baseball cap, but the photographers got their shots. The woman who'd once strutted around town like she owned it now looked like a common criminal being perp-walked into court. Colby, true to form, tried to play the victim. His lawyer claimed he was a love-struck fool who'd been manipulated by a, quote 93. It might have worked if not for the recordings where he bragged about stealing my wife and spending my money. The civil suits were even more devastating. Lydia filed for divorce, seeking full custody of the children and half of all assets, including the home equity they'd stolen. I did the same, but with a twist. I demanded the return of all marital assets plus punitive damages for fraud. Sarah was brilliant in depositions. She had Dana on the witness stand for 6 hours, walking her through every lie, every theft, every betrayal. By the end, Dana was sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. Quote 94. Sarah said with surgical precision. Quote 95, quote 96. Dana whispered. Quote 97. Dana's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The court reporter was getting every word, and those words would be used to destroy any sympathy Dana might have hoped for. Colby's deposition was even worse. Sarah goaded him into losing his temper, and he started ranting about how I, quote 98, to be cheated on because I was, quote 99 and, quote $100. The man literally argued that being a faithful husband justified being robbed and humiliated. But the real coup de grace came when Lydia's private investigator delivered his final report. It turned out Dana and Colby weren't the only ones involved in their little conspiracy. Dana's best friend, Jennifer Walsh, had been helping them plan the whole thing. Jennifer owned a competing boutique and had apparently convinced Dana that destroying her marriage and moving to Florida would eliminate business competition while giving Jennifer access to Dana's client list. She'd even helped them research divorce lawyers and asset protection strategies. "It's a criminal conspiracy," Sarah explained. 3 people working together to defraud 2 families. The district attorney is salivating. Jennifer's involvement added a whole new dimension to the case. Suddenly, this wasn't just about adultery. It was about organized fraud. The FBI got involved. The IRS started auditing all 3 businesses. What had started as a cheating scandal was now a federal case. The town turned on them completely. Colby's construction company lost every client. Dana's boutique was boycotted into bankruptcy within a month. Jennifer's store suffered the same fate. Nobody wanted to do business with people who conspired to destroy families. But the sweetest revenge was watching their relationship implode under pressure. When faced with serious jail time, Colby immediately threw Dana under the bus, claiming she'd seduced him and manipulated him into the affair. Dana responded by revealing that Colby had been cheating on her too, with at least 2 other women during their 3-month affair. Their love story became a Jerry Springer episode played out in court documents and police reports. The passionate romance that had been worth destroying 2 marriages for turned into mutual recrimination and betrayal. They went from soulmates to bitter enemies in the span of 6 weeks. The final hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. Gray skies, cold wind, the kind of weather that matched the mood of everyone involved. Dana and Colby sat at separate tables with their lawyers, refusing to make eye contact with each other or their former spouses. Judge Harrison was a no-nonsense veteran who'd been handling family court for 30 years. He'd seen every kind of marital dispute, every excuse, every sob story. He was not impressed by what he'd heard about this case. Quote, 103. He began, quote, 14. He awarded Lydia full custody of the children, the house, and 70% of all marital assets. Colby was ordered to pay child support and alimony that would keep him broke for the next decade. My settlement was even better. I got the house, both cars, all retirement accounts, and a judgment for damages that essentially gave me everything Dana had ever owned or hoped to own. Her boutique's assets, her personal belongings, even her jewelry. All of it became mine. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, I'm ordering both defendants to pay all legal fees for both plaintiffs. The court finds that this fraud was deliberate, calculated, and designed to cause maximum harm to the victims. Dana started crying again. Colby stared at the table like he was trying to burn a hole through it with his eyes. Their lawyers looked embarrassed to be associated with such obvious losers. But we still weren't done. The criminal trials were scheduled for spring, but I didn't want to wait that long for complete satisfaction. Dana and Colby had humiliated me in front of the entire town, made me a laughingstock, stolen my money and my dignity. Public embarrassment and financial ruin weren't enough. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to have their entire world collapse around them. That's when I discovered Dana's little secret. While going through her personal effects, now legally mine thanks to the divorce settlement, I found a safety deposit box key hidden in her jewelry case. The box contained documents that revealed Dana's boutique had been laundering money for a local drug dealer named Tommy Ricci. Tommy wasn't a major player, just a small-time dealer who moved marijuana and cocaine to college kids and bored housewives. But he needed a way to clean his cash, and Dana's boutique provided the perfect front. Fake sales, inflated inventory, cash transactions that existed only on paper. It was a simple but effective operation. The best part? Dana had been skimming from Tommy's money, too. She was stealing from her husband, her boyfriend, and her criminal business partner. The woman was an equal opportunity thief. I could have turned the evidence over to the FBI and let them handle it. But that would have been too easy, too clean. I wanted to watch Dana's face when she realized how thoroughly she'd been outmaneuvered. So I called Tommy directly. Quote, 107. We met at a diner on the outskirts of town. Tommy was exactly what you'd expect from a small-time drug dealer. Gold chains, expensive sneakers, the kind of swagger that comes from watching too many gangster movies. He thought he was Tony Soprano. In reality, he was more like Tony Soprano's mentally challenged cousin. Quote 108. He said without preamble. Quote 109. His eyes narrowed. Quote 110. Quote 111. I explained the situation. The divorce, the criminal charges, the civil judgments. Dana was going to prison, but before she did, there might be a way to recover some of Tommy's losses. She's got a life insurance policy worth $200,000, I told him. Beneficiary is her sister in California. But if something were to happen to Dana before the criminal trial, that money would be tied up in legal proceedings for years. Tommy wasn't the brightest bulb, but he understood the implications. Quote 114. Quote 115. It was a dangerous game, But I was past caring about danger. Dana had destroyed my life, stolen my money, made me a joke in my own town. If she was scared, if she spent her remaining free time looking over her shoulder, if she understood what it felt like to be helpless and vulnerable, well, that seemed like justice to me. Tommy made his move 3 days later. Dana was leaving her lawyer's office when Tommy and 2 of his associates cornered her in the parking garage. I wasn't there, of course. I was at work, with a dozen witnesses to prove it. But Lydia happened to be driving by and saw the whole thing. According to her account, Tommy was very polite. He simply explained that Dana owed him money, that he knew about the skimming, and that he expected full repayment within 48 hours. No threats, no violence, just a business-like conversation between criminal partners. But Dana understood the subtext. She called me that night. Hysterical. Quote, 116. Quote, 117. I asked, innocently. Quote, 118. Quote, 119. Quote, 120. And there it was, the perfect trap. Dana couldn't go to the authorities without admitting to money laundering. She couldn't pay Tommy without money she no longer had. She couldn't run without violating her bail conditions. She was completely, utterly helpless. For the first time in months, I slept well. The next morning brought even better news. Colby had been arrested for violating a restraining order. Apparently, he'd been harassing some of his former clients, demanding payment for work they claimed was substandard. When they refused, he'd shown up drunk at their houses, making threats and causing disturbances. The man was having a complete breakdown. His business was gone, his wife had left him, his girlfriend had betrayed him, and now he was facing serious jail time. The stress had pushed him over the edge into full-blown alcoholic rage. His arrest made the local news. Video of Colby being handcuffed in his underwear outside someone's house at 2 a.m, screaming about how everyone had conspired against him. It was pathetic and hilarious and deeply satisfying. But the best was yet to come. Jennifer Walsh, Dana's co-conspirator and former best friend, decided to make a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she agreed to testify against Dana and Colby, revealing the full extent of their fraud and conspiracy. The details were even worse than I'd imagined. They hadn't just planned to steal my money. They'd planned to frame me for domestic violence, possibly even plant drugs in my house to ensure I'd be arrested and discredited. Jennifer had researched how to fake bruises, how to create false evidence, how to manipulate the legal system to destroy an innocent person. They'd wanted to send me to prison for crimes I didn't commit while they ran off with my life savings. When I learned about this final betrayal, something inside me snapped. It wasn't enough to ruin them financially or socially. It wasn't enough to see them humiliated and imprisoned. I wanted them to suffer the way they'd planned to make me suffer. I wanted them to experience real fear. That's when I made the call that would end this story once and for all. Tommy, it's Marshall. I think it's time we had another conversation. The final confrontation came on a cold February evening at the Riverside Motel, the same place where Dana and Colby had conducted their affair. The irony was too perfect to resist. I'd arranged to meet Dana there under the pretense of discussing a possible plea agreement. She was desperate enough to believe that I might show mercy, that there might be some way to avoid the prison sentence that was waiting for her. She was wrong. Dana arrived first, looking haggard and frightened. 3 months of legal battles, public humiliation, and criminal pressure had taken their toll. The confident, beautiful woman who'd once strutted around town like she owned it was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed shadow who jumped at every sound. She was waiting in room 237, the same room where she'd betrayed our marriage. I'd made sure to request it specifically. "Marshall," she said as I entered, "thank you for coming. I know this is difficult, but maybe we can work something out." "Oh, we're definitely going to work something out," I replied, closing the door behind me. That's when Colby emerged from the bathroom. Dana gasped. Quote, 125. Quote, 126, I said. Quote, 127. Colby looked as bad as Dana, Unshaven, drunk, wearing clothes that hadn't been washed in days. His construction business was gone, his wife had taken everything, and the criminal charges were going to put him away for years. He was a broken man with nothing left to lose. "What the hell do you want, Marshall?" he slurred. "I want you both to understand something very important," I said, sitting in the room's single chair while they stood awkwardly by the bed. Quote 130. Dana started to speak, but I held up my hand. Quote 131. I pulled out my phone and showed them a video. Tommy Ricci and his associates loading boxes into a van outside Dana's boutique. "Tommy's been very busy," I explained. "Cleaning out your store, Dana, taking everything he claims you owe him, which, according to my calculations, is pretty much everything." Dana's face went white. Quote 134. Quote 135. She slumped onto the bed, finally understanding how completely she'd been outmaneuvered. "And Colby," I continued, "I have some news about your house. Remember that home equity line you used to fund your affair? Well, the bank's calling it in. Foreclosure proceedings start next week." "That's impossible," he said. "Lydia would have told me." "Lydia doesn't know yet. But she will, right after the bank seizes the property for non-payment. Turns out, when you steal $17,000 from a home equity line and then get arrested for harassment, banks get nervous about their investments." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where their affair had begun. "You see, while you two were playing house and planning my destruction, I was playing a much longer game. Every move you made, every crime you committed, every lie you told, I was 3 steps ahead, making sure it would all come back to destroy you." The room was silent, except for the sound of Dana crying and Colby's heavy breathing. Quote war. I turned back to face them. Quote warrior. Quote warrior, Dana whispered. Quote warrior 5. Quote warrior 6. I asked. Quote warrior 7. She shook her head, still crying. Quote 148. Colby suddenly lunged at me, but months of drinking and stress had made him slow and clumsy. I stepped aside easily, and he crashed into the wall. Quote 149. I said calmly, pulling out my phone to record. Quote 150. He slumped to the floor, defeated. Quote 151. I continued. Quote 152. Quote 153, Dana asked. Quote 154. I'd saved the best for last. Their faces when they realized I had evidence of their most serious crime, the plan to send an innocent man to prison, was worth every moment of pain they'd put me through. Quote 155. Colby gasped. Quote 156. The fight went out of them completely. They sat on the bed like broken dolls, finally understanding that they'd lost everything and there was no way back. "Why?" Dana asked. "Why go this far? Why destroy us so completely?" I looked at my wife of 15 years, the woman I'd once loved more than life itself, and felt absolutely nothing. "Because you didn't just cheat on me," I said. "You didn't just steal from me. You tried to destroy me completely, to send me to prison for crimes I didn't commit while you ran off with my life's work. You wanted to erase me from existence." I walked to the door and paused with my hand on the handle. "Well, congratulations. You succeeded. The Marshall Dyer who loved you, who trusted you, who would have done anything for you, that man is gone forever. What's left is someone you should have been very careful not to create." I opened the door and stepped into the cold night air. "Enjoy prison," I said, and walked away from the ruins of my former life.